There are many, many modifiers, and it is not a here is hard, here is soft, and here is specular and here is diffuse. It is a sliding scale. There are things in between this. So I'm going to walk you through lots of different modifiers and explain to you how they work or how they can work and what you could use them for. So looking at the construct of modifiers now, sometimes what companies say a light does isn't necessarily what it actually does. You need to really look at it and work out what it's going to achieve. It also helps you pick the modifier. So although I've done a brief overview of what's out there, let's have a real detailed look at these things. So quite a few of the shots in my portfolio are actually shot like this, just completely bare bulb. There's no modifier, there's nothing going on, it's just a light source fired straight at it. It doesn't come out particularly diffuse, doesn't come out particularly specular, sometimes get some weird shadows due to the construct of this part here, but it's pretty simple. Now, I'm going to kind of go from small to big here. Now, this is a very wide reflector. Some people call them spill kills, but they're actually called reflectors. I think some brand at some point misnamed them. But this is a wide one. And one of the joys of these sorts of modifiers is, if you have it like this at a certain power, it might be at F10, and without changing any settings, simply by adding this, you'll probably go up to F16, because it makes sure the light is thrown forward. These are very cheap. You can get them on Amazon and places like that. They'll give very crisp specular light, and they're what are called a very efficient modifier. So this massive softbox next to me is a very inefficient modifier. If you had a light going into that, you might get f2.8, and then if you change it to this without changing any power on the light at all, it might be putting out like f14. So very useful tool if you need a lot of light to come out. Slightly bigger than that is your standard 7-inch reflector. And then these, again, you can pick up very cheap, and they fit grids to them. So as well as having your hard specular lights, it's pretty small to most subjects, you can also pop a grid on it and really control where that light goes, and that will stop the spread of light. It also eats up quite a lot of the power. Now this one here is a 50-degree grid, and with this particular type of reflector, you don't really get much tighter than a 20-degree grid. But if you upgrade to something a bit more premium, like a P70 or a P65 by Broncolor, you can get these grids that are so tight, they will literally just light a part of a label on a bottle. So this one here, as you can see from its design, it is considerably bigger, so it's slightly softer. It's also deeper, which means the light will be slightly more focused on the subject. And then in terms of the quality, the material on the inside of this and this are both very different. This here gives a far nicer specular light than this one. Sometimes you don't need a nicer specular light, you need this one. So there's no particular best modifier, it's just what's right for the look you're going for. Now this here is actually something that's quite dated, it's a snoot. They don't get used that much anymore. They used to be used back in the olden days to light people's hair or to put a light on a background, but that's sort of gone out of style now. But all it does is it channels the light down, you can pop a grid on the end of it. Some of them come with lenses so you can focus them, change the aperture, and they are very inefficient modifiers. So a snoot with an optical lens on it, when it's really stopped down, you'll need, like I said, that big 32 or 6400 watt light. But one of these here, 400 watt light, will be absolutely ample for it. Then the final type of reflector is actually the spill kill. And this is what a spill kill actually is. And it'll stop light spilling onto a certain area of it with the reflector. So these are often used in portraiture when you don't want the light to spill onto the subject. But really, you can just get a bit of cinefoil and wrap it round your main light and it'll do the same thing. Now moving along a bit from the sort of reflectors, we move to softlighters, and these are still of hard construct, but they're much bigger and much wider. So this one here has a white interior, so it's no longer specular. Now it's not super diffuse like a softbox would be, but it's certainly not as specular as something like the P70 by Broncolor, which was the big reflector. Now these are great when you want a sort of even or more even light, more to the point. They're great when you don't want the specularity to distract from the subject. So maybe you want that hard light, but you want it to be not specular. Something like this can be very useful. Then moving on from that, this here is another soft lighter, and this is a sort of two-part construction. So we've got the first piece here, and then there's a double layer of diffusion within it. And this here is actually designed to recreate sunlight at a certain time of day, and it is used to photograph architectural models or products whenever you need that exact sunlight look. It's the right shape to be the sun, it offers the same sort of diffusion. The middle layer of diffusion, which I can't really take out, it sort of splits the light in a certain way. It's very different to what a softbox produces. So again, it's a very specific tool. A 500 watt light would be enough for this because of its efficiency, but you know, a speed light wouldn't really do the job in here. And then we move on to beauty dishes. And the difference between a beauty dish and a Softlighter is this bit here. And what it does is the light doesn't have the hotspot in the middle anymore, and it hits it, bounces back and wraps around. Now this one here is a silver one, but it's not textured, so it's kind of halfway between a white and a fully specular modifier. These are very big in beauty and fashion photography. They sort of need to be within 2 meters of the subject to have the full effect. But you can obviously put them at the other side of the room and just create a standard reflector sort of look with it. So that is this one here. It's slightly misshapen because I think I bent it at some point or sat on it. And then this one here is a much larger one, which is white on the inside. So it's more diffused look rather than specular than the silver one. And again, I use this for food photography quite a lot, but I actually bought it from when I was a product, no, not a product photographer. I was never a product photographer, a portrait photographer. And again, very efficient with light. You don't need much power. If this is 2 meters from your subject, 200 watts of light will give you a sort of F13 look. So this here is your standard size of softbox. It's a very simple construct. It's black around the side so the light doesn't sort of spill out everywhere. And then on the inside, if I just take this down, you have several baffle layers and a specular interior. So you can either shoot it with everything in place. You can do this here, we get a bit of specular and a bit of diffuse, or you can remove it and just get a rectangular specular light. Now these, as they suggest, produce soft light when up close, but it's obviously all very much a relative thing. So when thinking back to the inverse square law, if I want an evenly lit scene, I might need a softbox, but I might need this massive one over here that I can put 10 meters away from the actual subject, put a 3200 watt light in it to get that even and consistent lighting. However, if you don't have that, what I used to do was take 4 of these and stack them up next to each other. So it created one giant light and put 4 500 watt heads in the back of it. So I had like a 2000 watt setup, because we can't always have these monstrous softboxes kicking around. We don't always have a 2000 watt light. So sometimes you have to be a little bit creative. Alternatively, you could just get a bit of diffusion material, a bed sheet or a scrim, and just shoot light into it to give you that sort of massive softbox. And we often do that in here. We'll set up a huge 3 meter wide background support system, cover it in scrim material, which is this sort of stuff here, and just shoot lights through it from behind. Now, this is an off the peg softbox, so the light's in the center, it shoots through, it's a direct light, it goes directly through it, and it's sort of hot in the middle, cool at the edges. It tries to even it out. Some are better than others. Elinchrom make an indirect one where it shoots the light back into it and it wraps around, which is much better. But this is, you know, absolutely good enough for pro use. But if you're using the giant scrim, you can actually put several reflected lights behind it with grids on and pinpoint the exact area that you want to pick out, and then it will gradate across the scrim and slightly darken the areas around it. Not dramatically, it'll still look like a softbox has lit it, but it lets you have those key areas picked out. Now I have quite a few of these sorts of softboxes, and this one's different to the other ones that I use. It has a much darker black interior here, so you can really feather the light and choose what it does and doesn't catch on the corners. My other ones, the actual modifier diffusion layer comes right to the edge, and it's important to look at these small details in choosing the softbox. There's no better or worse option, but they do offer very different levels of control of light. Moggy, what have you killed? It's a spider. Very much the same design as a softbox, apart from the shape, is an Octabox, although this has got so many sides it's no longer octa. Now, some of these claim to be parabolic, but it can only be parabolic if you can move the light forwards and backwards inside it, because you have to be able to focus the light to get true parabolic light. And once it becomes parabolic, the inverse square law no longer matters. It just throws that light for miles. But this here, this is a softbox in a sort of circular shape. It will give a different catch light. Again, it has the deep sides, so you can sort of really choose where the light feathers when it falls off the outsides. And it's quite deep here as well, and that also changes the spread of the light. So anything which is shallow and wide, the spread will be quite wide. Anything which is like this will have quite a narrow beam of light. Obviously, when it's parabolic, it'll literally go in a straight line, hence the name parabolic. Right, if I move this light out of it so I can show that. There? No, there. Now, behind me over here is a huge 8-foot Octabox, which is indirect. So the light actually mounts to the inside of it and it shoots back into it and it bends round and comes out again. It gives incredibly specular light. So it's the exact opposite of this big softbox, which gives diffuse light. They're both big and they're both soft. This one, can't see on the screen, there we go. This one's specular, this one's diffuse. So the reason we have such big modifiers is not so we can get particularly soft light, but it's so we can move them further and further away, so they're relatively still large to the subject, so we get an even spread of light from the inverse square without it being too hard. Now, as well as these modifiers, we have some additional modifying tools I want to talk you through. So as well as these softboxes, reflectors, beauty dishes, and all that stuff, there's the more DIY things as well. And this is where you can really sculpt your light and give it the individual look. So this here is Lee white diffusion filter, and it's just a roll. You can cut it up, you can pop it on one of those specular reflectors, stick it on there with a bit of gaff tape, and suddenly you've got a diffuse reflector. Or you can literally roll it down and create whatever size softbox you want. A couple of bits of card on either side, or just none if it doesn't really matter, and you can shoot a light through it, bare bulb, with a softbox, whatever you want to do. You can increase the diffusion of an already diffused light. It's a very useful bit of kit. We go through loads of it. If you're on a real tight budget, buy tracing paper rolls. Off Amazon, they're about £15. I think this is about £50. As well as using it for that, we often cut it up and get a bit of modelling wire. We'll create these little bits here. And if you've just got a slight bit of the frame which needs some diffusion on it where no one else does, you can pop this in there and it will just diffuse that one little area. It's quite useful to have these. They're often held on by C-stands in certain areas, and it will just sort out a very small problem area of your frame. So I know a lot of people struggle with like burning out one specific area of the frame, and this can just help bring that back a little bit. Now, the other thing we do is we use these frames here and we'll just attach the diffusion to it, so we can hold it in as like a mini softbox anywhere in frame. These are really useful. You can get them off Amazon, you can get them from AG Photographic. They're very sort of good sturdy frames and they fit in the C-stand knuckles, so you can hold them wherever you want. So you could have a nice bit of diffusion across here, and then you could use a gridded reflector behind it, so you'll get that hot spot in the center and just the gradation across. Or you could even have the hot spot here, because with a softbox, that light's always going to come from the center, but once you've got control of the diffusion and the light separately, you can really start to play with it. Now, on the exact opposite side of that, this is the same frame with some theatre curtain on it, and this is just black. So if you ever find that your shadows aren't becoming shadowy enough, you can pop this at the opposite side. It will stop any light in the room bouncing back in again. This stuff is super absorbent. Now, not all black fabric is as absorbent. Theatre curtains are particularly good for that sort of thing. Now, sometimes rather than diffusing a certain area, you need to reduce the exposure of a certain area. And that's where a net comes in, which is something like this. They come in various grades. And what you want is the ones where there's nothing down one side, so you can get a clear gradation between where you've darkened it and the rest of the frame, rather than like a hard stop. These are really useful. And these come with these frames here. These are from Pixa Pro. And you can just use them just to knock off that light a little bit, but whilst having a still nice soft fall off from here. There's no sudden hard stop to it. These get used an awful lot, especially with tricky subjects where some stuff's reflective and some stuff isn't. And these also come in different sizes. So here's a dot and a dabber and a finger. And these if you need a much smaller area doing, and the same with flags, just smaller shapes. But you can always just use a bit of modelling wire and a bit of gaff tape. You can pretty much knock up anything you need with those. Then in terms of bouncing light back in again, we'll often use this, which is just a bit of aluminium foil, tin foil, aluminum foil, depending where you're from, just to give that specular reflection. Like with my recent Guinness shot, we needed a gold reflection, so we use a bit of gold card and we use that to get the nice logo in there. Sometimes it's something as simple as a bit of white paper or foam board, and we always cut these into weird shapes so we can get it exactly where we need it and reflecting exactly what we want to reflect. And then one of my favorites at the moment is the mirror, and we can just use that just to pick up the light and place it exactly where we want it with much more specificity than with a piece of white paper. And then as earlier we were talking about turning soft boxes into strip boxes, this stuff here is called Cinefoil by Roscoe, and it is a aluminium foil that is completely black. Not only that, but you can sculpt it and bend it into various shapes. It doesn't burn when it gets too hot, so you can put it on a hot light. You can create any shape you want with it. It's really useful, and this comes out on pretty much every food shoot we do. Now, the last thing I want to show you is something which drinks photographers use a lot of. Now, this here is a tube, and inside it is a polarizing gel. So it's a sheet of polarizer, and you twist it around on the light until it's at the right angle to polarize the specific light. But then you also need the polarizing filter on your camera. Now, the joys of this is you can have one light shooting straight at a glass bottle and polarize it, and then use your polarizing filter just to cut the glare out from that, but maintain the glare from the other lights, because glare is often good, by not polarizing them. Now, this stuff is stupid expensive. You want to buy it in the biggest sheet possible, cut it into small rolls and keep it in tubes, keep it clean, wear gloves when you use it. Because if you think a polarizing filter is expensive, then this much polarizing gel will break your heart slightly. But it's very useful when you have the money to buy it. Now, the only other big thing in here, which is very different, is this here, which is my hazy light. And this is a softbox of sorts, but it's solid. And it takes a 3200 watt head, which is very useful. It's on this big articulated arm, which is very useful. It's very shallow. It's very even light. The light across the whole of the thing is very good. The head inside it, you can focus back and forth. You're probably not going to buy one of these because they are so hard to find. I'd been looking for them for 3 years until I found one in good condition. They're not particularly expensive anymore. They were £10,000 brand new. You can get them for like £500 second hand now, because when people need to get rid of them, they really need to get rid of them because they're quite big and cumbersome. You can't just leave it on the curb for someone to take away. But yeah, you don't need one of these. I just had one because I always wanted one. So yes, don't worry about those. But yeah, that's pretty much every modifier in here that I use, how they're built and how they're sort of useful within a working environment.